Welcome to the neophytes of Narratology, the internet's most pretentious and pseudo-intellectual pursuit since, perhaps, Nietzsche's thus podcast Zarathustra, or Camus' renowned vlog of Sisyphus. While lesser men aspire to stand on the shoulders of mere giants, we at the Lost Signals will accept nothing less than titans. So join us as we delve into the fundamentals of narrative nuance and critique the critics who proclaim to know the universal qualities of effective storytelling.
Hello and welcome to part 6 of our study of Hero with a Thousand Faces. This is our penultimate episode.
Yep.
So we're going to basically conclude the part 2, and the next episode we're going to go into the epilogue and our general thoughts on Hero with a Thousand Faces. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Stephen Hermosi.
Hello.
And Scott Dola.
I do.
So we're going to start off with chapter 3 now, which is Transformations of the Hero.
So many transformations.
Many of them.
This follows the creation myths and the mother virgin goddess type thing, into returning to the study of the hero. So the first part is the primordial hero and the human, which kind of deals with the transition from the creation myth to the legendary hero and legendary mythology as well.
That's pretty much the first note I have is moving transition from myth to legend.
I also have the note that there are diminishing returns with the hero legend, in the sense that as the timeline of creation and heroics approaches the modern day, the heroic myth isn't as grand,
isn't quite as heroic.
Early myths. But
sure.
Do you have any thoughts on the first section? Because that's all I have on it.
I have aside from what I just said, basically it's more human condensed in scope, and that's pretty much the transformation. That's the primordial hero versus the human.
I only have one note about this section, and it's this is the creation of the world by the divine, and the passage of history according to or via humanity.
Yes, exactly. Human focused, if you will,
and
human music,
and that's kind of what it's about. Human music. I like it.
So the second section is the childhood of the human hero, which is an abrupt return to the main plot.
I don't know if it's abrupt, but
because I feel that this work, and I think we mentioned this in the last episode, had started to move away from the heroic journey.
Yeah,
and this is a sudden return to that, and
I will grant you that. Yes,
and it actually has a really neat segment in this of, in a sense, predestination versus free will. I know. Metaphysics.
That's what I was going to bring up, of course. That's my first note, but go on.
And in a sense, the cultural ramifications that come with the teller choosing the free will versus the predestination, in that if the listener of the epic tale feels that the hero is destined to do heroic actions, it won't be as much of or it's kind of an ideal to live up to, versus if the hero had free will, it's something that that the listeners will feel that they too also can achieve that heroic level.
Exactly.
And they'll start acting as if the hero that they too could be a hero.
Yeah, so again, as you just mentioned and sort of preempted me, but I think it's an important point that was there and very noticeable is that, yes, it sort of presents a bit of a predestination problem. Yeah. Because if you can, if you see that and if the myth sort of seems to lean that way, then it's going to somewhat change your interpretation and what it's supposed to impart to the listener and or reader of said myth, if indeed that, that little hurdle seems to arise as you the recipient of the myth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think an important part of this little section as well is that this gets transferred to like real life people as well as myths. I think one of the was it Washington and the Cherry Tree was mentioned. So like this is the kind of thing like as people or even myths pass on like longer and longer, they tend. It seems to me I'm extrapolating a lot out of it, but like it seems to me that like it tends to become the case that their entire life becomes this mythological thing, as opposed to just their heroic deeds. You know, like their childhood becomes this like mythologized thing.
Well, I have a quote directly supporting your thesis there. But the makers of the legend have seldom rested content to regard the world's great heroes as mere human beings who broke past the horizons that limited their fellows and returned with such boons as any man with equal faith and courage might have found. On the contrary, the tendency has always been to endow the hero with extraordinary powers from the moment of birth, or even the moment of conception. The whole hero life is shown to have been a pageant of marvels, with the great central adventure as its culmination. Actually, there's... To go off on a tangent quickly, I remember seeing a documentary at one point about the apocrypha of like the Bible and the stories they chose not to include within the Bible that may be still considered part of the Christian mythology.
Sure.
And one of those was about Jesus' childhood and how he was performing miracles even as a child, and that was left out of the full Bible text.
For the most part, yeah.
That's an interesting aspect that kind of confirms a lot of, like, at least in Western society, what Joseph Campbell's talking about here. That, we decided to, in a sense, imbue the character of Jesus as more of a person who, because of he's the Son of God, but he also, like, there are stories of him, like, raising the dead as a child. And, it's an interesting mixture of the two.
The complexities of Christianity heroes is sort of what I had. In light of the view that you just said is another note I have. Yeah. And that's kind of all I have for this one. But it's certainly like...
Well, there's actually a whole other section to this as well.
Another big one that is brought up, that is the obvious one of this is, and I think it's brought up, is Hercules in the crib strangling the serpents that were sent to kill him. It's the idea that kind of no hero just turns into a hero at a certain point, or like at least in terms of this, it's you have lived your entire life overcoming obstacles and doing these things, or like struggling to become a hero, and or perhaps struggling against becoming a hero in certain senses.
But nevertheless,
at some point the call comes, and these heroes were ready, they were prepared, and they were good to go.
But it's also interesting that, in a way, it explains the absence of the fulfillment of the heroic journey immediately. So I'm going to give another quote here. In sum, the child of destiny has to face a long period of obscurity. This is a time of extreme danger, impediment, or disgrace. He is thrown inward to his own depths or outward to the unknown. Either way, when what he touches is a darkness unexplored. And this is a zone of unsuspected presences, benign as well as malignant. An angel appears, a helpful animal, a fisherman, a hunter, crone, or
what have you.
Fostered in the animal school, or like Siegfried, below ground amongst the gnomes that nourish the root of the trees of life. Or again, alone in some little room, the story has been told 1,000 ways. The young world apprentice learns the lesson of the seed powers, which reside just beyond the sphere of the measured and the named. And to be fair, I think it's very interesting that some heroes get angels and wizards, others get a fisherman.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, it's
whatever it is, whatever you get.
There's various facets. And you're right, I did have that as my final note. I missed it earlier, that sort of like an obscure childhood then precedes the actual glory and adventure, which, as you said, is the culmination of the hero's biography / myth legend.
Yeah, to give a very modern example of this, you have Harry Potter, which existed in his closet under the stairs for however long before he's given his call to adventure.
I mean, but that's the perfect example, because his first heroic act happened when he was a baby, doesn't even remember it in that book series. I don't know
mythology,
if either you've read Harry Potter,
yes.
right? All right. I know you haven't, Scott, but yeah, like
But I can appreciate what you're saying.
He becomes famous because he, as a baby, withstood the greatest evil that's ever happened, and he doesn't know any of that, and he struggles with that his entire. Well, he doesn't struggle with that for a long time because he doesn't know about it, but he struggles with that his entire young adulthood,
right? An obscured sort of like
childhood and young adulthood.
In a way, it's baby's first heroic journey.
Right, that's amazing. Yes,
but it has all the same things of him going off on an adventure. You have the kind of supernatural forces helping the child along or the young adult, and his eventual return to the world in order to go upon the adult heroic journey.
Yeah.
But I have one last quote for this section, which is the summation of there. The conclusion of the childhood cycle is the return or recognition of the hero, when after the long period of obscurity, his true character is revealed. This event may precipitate a considerable crisis, for it amounts to an emergence of powers hitherto excluded from human life. Earlier patterns break to fragments or dissolve. Disaster greets the eye. Yet after a moment of apparent havoc, the creative value of the new factor comes to view, and the world takes shape again in unsuspected glory. This theme of crucifixion and resurrection can be illustrated either on the body of the hero himself or his effects upon his world.
Yep. Sure, I mean, that's a good closing quote, and it basically serves as a very good summary of this section.
So, that was, I think, one of two really interesting sections.
More meaty sections,
yes.
I will agree, yes.
So the third is The Hero as a Warrior, which is, in a sense, the return of the child from exile, and basically see Hero with a Thousand Faces Part 1. But
callback, whatever that is in music, yeah.
I'm going
Reprise.
Exactly. The place of the hero's birth, or the remote land of exile from which he returns to perform his adult deeds amongst men, is the midpoint or navel of the world.
Yep.
Just as ripplers go out from an underwater spring, so the forms of the universe expand in circles from the source. Whatever that
it means that from the hero's starting city, his hub city, which is the world navel in this in the symbology of all this, then as his deeds, as he performs deeds, they will again, precede or
go out from there.
Exactly. I mean, it's funny that you chose that quote because that's pretty much what I just said, the rephrase of it.
That was kind of what I was going to say, too.
But I felt as if that was indeed the core sort of, encapsulating.
I think another part of this section that I thought was important was that the victory that the hero has is not over specifically monsters, right? It's over the status quo of the world.
You're right, Steve. I've slayed the status quo.
Yeah. And that's kind of a big thing in terms of this section.
I do have anything else real quick?
No, but that's actually a very complex idea that you just introduced.
It is, and I have actually an example of that I want to say that is not in this book. But go on.
I'll once I finish, we'll go into you. But Joseph Campbell goes into depth, and it's actually a very hefty quote, and that I'm not going to read at this point. But it's going into the idea of the dragon or the monster or the ogre or the tyrant or whatever appears in has such defeating not only the status quo. It can represent the status quo, but you know what? I am actually going to read the quote because I think that Joseph Campbell does a much better job in this
all right.
section.
Go for it.
For the mythological hero is the champion not of things become, but of things becoming. The dragon to be slain by him is precisely the monster of the status quo, Holdfast, the keeper of the past. From obscurity the hero emerges, but the enemy is great and conspicuous in the seat of power. He is enemy dragon tyrant, because he turns to his own advantage the authority of his position. He is Holdfast not because he keeps the past, but because he keeps. The tyrant is proud, and therein resides his doom. He is proud because he thinks of his strength as his own. Thus he is in the clown role. As a mistaker of shadow for substance, it is the destiny to be tricked. The mythological hero, reappearing from the darkness, is the source of the shapes of the day, brings a knowledge of the secret of the tyrant's doom. With a gesture as simple as the pressing of a button, he annihilates the impressive configuration. The hero deed is the continuous shattering of the crystallizations of the moment. The cycle rolls. Mythology focuses on the growing point. Transformation, fluidity, not stubborn ponderosity. is the characteristic of the living god. The great figure of the moment exists only to be broken, cut into chunks, and scattered abroad. Briefly, the ogre tyrant is the champion of the prodigious fact, the hero, the champion of the creative life.
Yeah, so real quickly, I mean, you're right. That's a very, again, serves as a good little passage to exemplify what he's talking about. And I sort of rephrase it before you go on, Steve-O, that as you mentioned, the hero is becoming. So, Red Dragon. I have Red Dragon next to me. And ironically, he has to slay the status quo dragon, who is now keeping. He's not becoming, he's just keeping. So, anyway, that's my little joke about it. But
the idea that I want to talk about is something that I read kind of recently is the idea of Medusa. When the Medusa myth was created, it was kind of this idea of this triumph over the status quo of goddesses being a large part of the culture and things like that. Medusa, if you actually look at the mythology, is really a pretty tragic figure.
Sure.
She gets raped and then transformed into a monster that turns people into stone. And the article that I was reading made a good point that was look, this is kind of the beginning of a more male-dominated culture, and the fact that she was made a monster in this story where she was completely set upon the entire time up until somebody comes to kill her, steal her head, so that he can, it's kind of that idea of this was their victory over the status quo of goddesses being an important part of their culture.
Sure.
I actually read that as well. And it's not just Medusa, but it's all three of the Gorgons.
Right.
And that back during the days when these myths were formed, there was actually snake worshipping, basically matriarchies.
Yeah.
And that this represents the enlightened male coming in to
show them
kill patriarchy coming in to kill the matriarchies.
Right.
And it's a very tragic story if you look at it that way.
It is, and if you the thing is, you have to come into it looking at it with a different being willing to look at it from a different angle, because that's not the story that you get, right? But if you take the whole story and kind of extrapolate what's going on and view it through a different lens, it's a really interesting story of Medusa as this defeated protagonist,
sure.
as this defeated hero of her own story.
No, you're right. That's very interesting. That didn't occur to me, and I think that makes it more substantial that we could talk more about. That's kind of came to me while we
were talking about it, but that fits perfectly into this, into what we're talking about. Anyway, that was my aside.
Not quite. I like it. Well done.
Yeah, it's interesting that what these myths kind of signify is that even if it doesn't match our current view of how things should be, at the time it was, this is the proper ordering of civilization. This is the hero defeating these women, these snake monsters, in order to...
Because it must be so. Because men must win, right?
Well, actually, oddly enough, in a lot of mythologies, that is the case.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But nonetheless, so this is the hero's journey in a way too.
Right.
And then, so from here on out, though, we're kind of dealing with potential endings for the hero.
Mm-hmm.
Which we start off with the hero as a lover. Which kind of says that...
Ooh la la.
Well, yeah, but this is kind of the most simplistic.
Yeah.
And of a hero's journey.
Other than Saint, I think.
In a sense. But
theoretically, the Saint has a higher calling. Where this is just the kind of the fairy tale romance of the hero coming in, taking the virgin bride, and ending up happily ever after.
Some might say love is a higher calling.
Yes, well.
Love lift us up where we belong.
Anyway. Sure. But I have similar to what you said earlier, my notes say it's a callback to the earlier sections of the man-woman division, the unity of that and what it represents and all that. And as a callback also to the section we just mentioned, the hero as warrior, where you're struggling against the status quo as represented by your parent figures. So you become the lovers and then overturn the status quo. And continue your becoming, if you will, as you advance from that point.
To further on that point you just made, Scott, when you deal with the idea of the tyrant as your parent, It's the idea is that they're impeding the way of future progress.
Yes,
and
exactly.
it's you needing to conquer that.
Right.
That's a very interesting.
I mean, it's a nice psychological sort of commentary in a sense. Sure.
Yeah, but honestly, the only note that I have for this is hero takes a wife, usually through hardship.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
It's pretty much it.
Thanks, Campbell's Cliff Notes.
It was a pretty. It was a pretty. I don't know. I didn't get much out of this section.
Sure, I get what you're saying. I understand.
So this next section is the next level up from the lover, which is the hero becomes the hero as emperor and as tyrant.
I enjoyed this one.
Which the hero becomes his father, and in a way, he can either become a wise leader and king, or like kind of shaman type character, or he can become the next generation's monster.
Or he slips in the grades back into an ogre. Is essentially what I have.
Yeah,
he's an agent of the cycle of life. Basically,
yeah, sure. I like that. Good. Sorry.
Kind of just like takes over where the previous section of history left off, and then becomes the agent of it, the cycle returning back and going back again.
Cycles within cycles, which I thought was, of course, a little bit interesting.
I did like the part where he talks about the hero going back to a more human state, right, and like becoming a tyrant himself.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting. I think that makes for an interesting story where it's like the hero kind of falls from grace, and then it takes another hero to come and usurp the previous one,
and so forth. So you might have a quote picked out, E, but there's the one that I have is you can either be a virtuous sword or a book of law style hero, which is something I believe a very condensed, paraphrased version of what's in there. But I thought that was like, sort of a nice way to put it, like an interesting way to cut up the way, like again, like. If the hero continues on this path and goes down this path, he'll end up as one or the other, more or less.
So we're on to the sixth section now, which is the hero's world redeemer. And I think this is the second
most substantial one. I'm going to say that.
I would agree.
And I have a lot of quotes to read from this, just to warn you guys. I'm going to start off with one, which is the first paragraph. 2 degrees of initiation are to be distinguished in the mansion of the father. From the first, the son returns as an emissary. But from the second, with the knowledge that I and the Father are one, heroes of the second highest illumination are the world redeemers, the so-called incarnations, in the highest sense. Their myths open out to cosmic proportions. Their words carry an authority beyond anything pronounced by the heroes of the scepter and the book. And I think this section kind of is similar to the previous one we read, except as I just said, it's the next level up of...
Exactly.
Well, the hero becomes a god, basically, right? In this sense, any heroic acts become the simplest, like snapping of a finger to the hero at this point,
kind of,
right? Like, it's not like heroic deeds may still be done, but they're not like a labor for the hero anymore. It's kind of you put an IDDQD. And you're just good to go.
Kind of. But like as you just said, I did think that myself when reading because it follows, and I'm assuming he did this on purpose, the previous section where the hero becomes a father type figure but who recognized this and then sort of like is not compelled but decides to spout this as the truth, and therefore he's able to save himself and the community at large.
It's the breaking of the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And he decides not to become that and realizes that he could, that path could be open to him, but because he recognizes that fact and actively chooses against it in a sense.
All right, now I'm going to...
I was going to say, I'm going to go off on a slight, not a tangent, but go off of that a little bit and say that there is mention that like often there's a period of just desolation because the hero is basically a god, but still has humanity, or still has the faults of his or her humanity within them, and that's kind of an interesting thing to me too. Like, anyway, I'll let you go.
I'm going to do a huge quote, so apologize.
Yeah.
The legends of the Redeemer describe the period of desolation as caused by a moral fault on the part of man. Adam in the garden. Jemshid on the throne. Yet from the standpoint of the cosmogonic cycle, a regular alternation of fair and foul is characteristic of the spectacle of time.
I've got that quote
Just
as well.
as in the history of the universe, so also is that of nations. Emanation leads to dissolution, youth to age, birth to death, form creative, vitality to the dead weight of inertia. Life surges, precipitating forms, and then ebbs, leaving Jetsam behind. The Golden Age, the reign of the World Emperor, alternates in the pulse of every moment of life. With the wasteland, the reign of the tyrant. The god who is the creator becomes the destroyer in the end. Stated in direct terms, the work of the hero is to slay the tenacious aspect of the father, dragon, tester, ochre king, and release from its ban the vital energies that will feed the universe. This can be done either in the accordance of the father's will or against his will. He, the father, may choose death for his children's sake, or it may be that the gods impose the passion upon him, making him their sacrificial victim. These are not contradictory doctrines, but different ways of telling one and the same story. In reality, Slayer and Dragon, Sacrificer and Victim, are of one mind behind the scenes, where there is no polarity or contraries, but mortal enemies on the stage, where the everlasting war of the gods and the titans is displayed. In any case, the Dragon Father remains a pleroma, no more diminished by what he exhales than he is increased by what he repossesses. Power outage, caused by the words of Joseph Campbell spoken with my tongue.
We've summoned the hero's storm.
He is the death, on whom our life depends. And to question, is death one or many? The answer is made that he is one as he is there, but many as he is in his children here. The hero of yesterday becomes the tyrant of tomorrow, unless he crucifies himself today.
Yes, which is the quote I like very much, and we discussed this just precast. Like when I read that line, that quote, it almost was like a sort of like infomercial, like crucify yourself today to avoid becoming the tyrant tomorrow.
It is a very good quote. I had no earthly idea what a pleroma was, so during a power outage, I looked it up.
We figured it out,
and it's got two definitions. In Gnosticism, the spiritual universe as the abode of God and the totality of the divine powers and emanations. And in Christian theology, it is the totality or fullness of the Godhead that dwells in Christ.
It's good to have a definition and a pronunciation.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I might get what he meant, but now knowing the definition, it certainly applies there to that quote.
Yeah.
So I really like this chapter because it is perhaps the most epic of the...
Again, the most substantial to me. The thing that I enjoyed reading and getting to into the most.
Mm-hmm. And I think it is perhaps, in a way, the most significant of the
hero
endings for the heroes.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I really like the section, and I think it's almost to themes to the obscure in a way that it becomes challenging to understand what he's trying to say here, particularly, but you can feel its importance in what.
Yes, it has more of a weight to it than seems the other ones, and possibly the next section.
It is a very interesting ending to the hero's journey, if you will. Kind of this idea of ascending, right? Past what his earthly, form could have done,
his initial,
and becoming something more, and that's a big part. Like honestly, that's a big part of a hero's story. A lot of times,
or at least the ones that we really attach ourselves to culturally.
Right.
Sure.
So the final ending, I suppose, of is part 7, which is the hero as a saint, which I have described as the rejection of the father for Buddhism.
I mean, that's funny, but I mean, it's fairly accurate. And I only have really one note as well, which not even worth reading, because this section I felt was just very narrow, and there's not much. Conversely to what we just said about World Redeemer as one of the endings for your hero, like you choose this for your hero's end, you sort of like just fade off into the background.
Well, kind of, but I think the important thing about this is that like it's the hero who has abolished flaws, right? It's the hero who has risen above all of his or her flaws,
which means they're no longer interesting.
To me, yes.
I agree.
That's the note that I have. I have two notes. Hero as saint. Hero devoid of flaws. Boring as fuck.
Yeah, I mean, in general, like, yes, I agree to that. And as humorous as that may be, it just seems to me that there just wasn't as much to this section, maybe because of that very fact.
Well, I would say that it's the opposite side of the coin to the hero as the world redeemer.
All right, sure, that's fair.
In a sense, they're both heroes that transcend in a sense, the cycle of the world.
Sure.
But where one is achieving it through action and through the decision, in a sense, the active way of rejecting it versus, in a sense, the pacifist
again, sort of like not regressing, but just sort of passively fading into a more meditative state, which means there's no longer hero deeds and hero actions to be taken.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I mean, it's important, and I think that the application of the hero as the saint is a lot more interesting than the theory behind it.
Yeah, I like that.
Sure.
I think that's well stated.
Where the theory behind the hero deciding not to become the king and or the tyrant and breaking that kind of cycle is a lot more like the theory of it is more abstract and interesting to dissect. This one is just him deciding to move away from that cycle versus breaking. In Game of Thrones, one of the great mythologies of our time, where they say, I'm going to break the wheel. Daenerys says that I'm going to break the wheel. Mm-hmm. Even though I don't necessarily know that's going to be what her outcome is.
Regardless.
Is her choice to become the world redeemer versus a person who decides that, I'm not going to take part in
the wheel is no longer my concern at all.
Yeah. I realized too late, I feel like we should have chosen people that embodied all of these but I can't do that on the spot, I don't think.
I mean, that'd be a fun exercise, but even Campbell himself doesn't quite do that. Yeah, sure. To be fair, not that we neglected, but he uses a number of myths in each of these that were interesting myths to read, but like I don't necessarily want to comment upon each and every one of them.
There's actually, I will do one for the saint, which I thought was very interesting, was Saint Thomas Aquinas, where he decided to even stop writing. Yeah, like it's not my purpose anymore.
I found enlightenment, and I'm beyond that even.
And of course, the Buddha is a great example of, as I mentioned in my kind of funny version of that. And the World Redeemer is, very. Actually, I guess you have to really go to the great heroes for like the kind of, whether it's in a sense Jesus or those kind of characters to really get to that. Yeah. Where again, for love and for, in a sense, either the right or the becoming the tyrant are smaller heroes in a way. Yeah. Not smaller in the sense of epic scale, but smaller in the sense of the greater message.
Where they stand on the scale of heroes, if you will.
Their permanence in the world, kind of, maybe.
Yeah. So the finale of this section and the finale of the hero is the departure of the hero. Mm-hmm. Death.
Which means the death of the hero.
Or walking away.
Yeah, or sort of transcendence, or like being accepted into the heavenly aspect.
Sphere, like
that. And it's mostly death scenes of prominent mythological figures. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I don't think I have much more to comment about that section.
Is it better to burn out or to fade away?
Should you have a walk-on part in the war or leave a role in the cage? Sure, I mean, that's humorous as well. But yeah, as you said, like it's just these two sections, the Saint and the Departure, just to me, not that they weren't interesting, just they weren't as substantive as the ones that came before. And even though, like, yes, it's the death of the hero certainly is, the ties into everyone's hero or not inevitable end. Yeah, it's important to comment upon, but I don't think he made like a lot of commentary of note upon it.
Well, I have one quote, a very quick one, Departure of the Hero, which is the last act in the biography of the hero is that of the death or departure. here the whole sense of the life is epitomized. And needless to say, the hero would be no hero if death held for him any terror. The first condition is reconciliation with the grave.
Sure.
And beyond that, that's the most interesting thing that I found.
Yeah,
aside from,
again, that's a nice, very little paraphrase of basically the entire point of that little section.
And speaking of death, the chapter 4, Dissolution, is divided into 2 sections: End of the Microcosm and End of the Macrocosm, which the former is death in the afterlife in different cultures, and the latter is end of the world in different cultures.
Yeah, exactly.
And really, he almost gives no commentary on these aspects in this part. It's just more of, here are presenting different myths about it. And
he got bored of talking about it.
That's the thing. Like, I don't know about that. I guess we can never say. But I just think it's, a little bit unfortunate that I did wish for a little bit more, again, commentary, more analysis, more in depth, rather than just saying, like, I believe we mentioned precast, and in a section he brings up the myth of or some of the elements of Ragnarok, or like the Viking end myth. Well, which is sort of one of the more well-known ones, but he doesn't really comment further upon it.
No,
I think what I would say, and I haven't read any other Joseph Campbell, but I know he wrote a lot more than this. I wonder if he wrote more about this, because I think this section could, if he wanted to do it, could literally be its own book.
I agree.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that could be extrapolated out of this, but these sections are short and just, there's not super, there's not a lot of stuff there.
They're more broad and abstract, as he was saying.
I think it's kind of interesting, like the microcosm versus the macrocosm is an interesting thing to talk about, insofar as like your. And I think he basically says, right, like, everyone's the hero of their own story at this point. Like, I don't think he comes out and says that, right?
No, if I recall. He said this opening line of this chapter is, the mighty hero of extraordinary powers, able to lift Mount Gavard, whatever, on a finger, and to fill himself with the terrible glory of the universe is each of us.
There you go. So he comes around and says it.
Yeah.
Never mind. But, it's kind of the idea of, like, you have... So all these stories are human stories, and you kind of have your own story that you go throughout your own life.
Sure,
and the reason that these are good, the reason that these myths and epic stories are good is, or enjoyed by a lot of people, is because you can see some sort of reference within your own life. And I think that's the idea of the microcosm part of it. And the macrocosm part, you can also see, you also have a frame of reference, but it's just bigger than yourself.
Sure. I'd like to bring up 2 things. I'm sorry, if you don't mind. Kind of quickly, and I don't know if this is an outright quote as well, but I have End of the Macrocosm is tying into End of Microcosm. As the hero form dissolves, so does the universe.
Right.
Sort of as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I would like to bring in one minor thing that, I'm not sure if you brought it up on any other neophytes, but because he's sort of centered on end of the world / universe ending tales, is that we definitely covered apocalypses here on the Lost Signals, at least used to back in the day. And this is my my learned little fact to bring to bear, perhaps you guys knew it, is that apocalypse itself is a Greek term, which means lifting of the veil. It's not necessarily the end of the world. It's just, the veil of this reality disappears and the next one is
unfolded.
Yes, exactly.
In a way, the idea of revelation is actually the same
it's from
thing,
that.
which is,
yes. You're right, exactly right. So that's all I want to bring up.
And so I have one final comment to make about this part of the Hero with a Thousand Faces. Is that I really enjoyed his transition, his going over the creation back to the hero's journey. Basically, I felt that creation and the apocalypse, in a way, were very kind of, it was a brief look at them. And I think he's trying to, in a sense, put into context the hero's journey in the greater mythology.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, the book wasn't necessarily about creation or apocalypse, right? It was about what happens in between.
Sure.
And I in a weird way, feel that this is very different than what the intent of part 1 was. Now, granted, is that a fault? Maybe not, but it just seems that almost extraneous to.
Yes, I think that's a pretty good term to use.
Greater theme of it.
I would largely agree to. Again, as I said, I would personally have wished him to explore this a bit further. But as you said, Sivo, it's possible that I don't know offhand that he may have had a separate work that did indeed do that.
The only other thing I've read from him is Power of Myth, which was dealing with symbology of a lot of myth.
Sure. But the word you're looking for is symbolism. Symbolism.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry.
Sure.
But nonetheless.
But either way.
Yeah. I really think that the third chapter is worth a read.
Yes.
It's detailing, in a way, a different way that he dealt with the hero's myth in part 1. And I think dealt with it in a more... Where, like, the first part was more of a psychological look at it, like, this is more of a symbolic look at, and in a sense... Yeah,
exactly. I agree.
Application of theory, in a way, perhaps.
Yeah.
But, nonetheless, this is it for now. We'll discuss this more when we get to the end.
The epilogue is coming up. But
finale of our analysis of Hero 1,000 Faces.
Indeed.
I don't have closing thoughts. Like I said,
I think
we covered the ones that I liked the most and said what we said about ones I thought were, if not weaker, just less substantial, as I keep saying. So, I guess, as you said, I recommend reading chapter 3 and maybe chapter 4 is like ancillary, like secondary reading, further reading if you so choose.
If you enjoyed the myth itself, part 4 is interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you're looking for theory, it's not.
Yeah.
I guess I guess I'll leave my overall thoughts of the book for the epilogue section.
Yep.
But we've come to the close of the book, right? This is it for the main part of Campbell's ideas about the hero's journey, and I'll say this: I have enjoyed this book so far. I'm going to read the epilogue probably in 15 minutes or something, some point soon. I don't expect anything new to come out of it, but I think that it has been an interesting read, and I'm glad that I finally finished this damn book, which I've been quote unquote reading for the last 7 years.
Was it an interesting journey?
It was an interesting journey.
It was for me as well so far. So yeah.
Well, I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, and I'm the hero with 1,000 wines. Here with Stephen Rossi.
Ooh, I'm a hero with 0 wines left.
And Scott Billa.
And I will become what I most dislike in my hero's journey. Good night.
This has been the Neophytes of Narratology. We hope that you've experienced an epiphany or two of the literary nature, but only metaphorically, of course.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manzer. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.